Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another product review. This time we're going to take a look at Grimtooth's Ultimate Traps collection, which is a thick book and one which I've had on my shelf for quite some time now. I'm just finally getting around to reviewing it. Now, for those of you who are unaware, Grimtooth's Traps has been a long-running series. They started with Flying Buffalo, which were the people behind the Tunnels and Trolls RPG, and what they are is a series of system-neutral traps. Not necessarily talking about the mechanics of them in a game mechanics sort of way, but rather talking about the actual physics mechanics behind them, and many of them in either a magically focused world or one in which a certain degree of humor is supposed to be expected. The majority of these traps are designed for use in the typical mythical dungeon crawl, so they should fit right in right there very well. Some of them may also be useful in other similar sort of genre creations. Now, before I get started, I will go ahead and say that this book, this collection, as it were, is available in a couple different editions. It is available in a hardcover, which I have. It's available in a softcover. It is available as a PDF on RPG Now, which I will put in the description below. It is also available as a foil and then a leather-bound foil, and if you get those come with additional content, which I do not have, because I did not feel like paying a couple $100. To be quite frank, those are really, really pricey. This, however, and the PDF are very, very reasonable. In fact, this one I actually got for about the same that the PDF is listed at. And while it's actually supposed to be a little bit more, it's just where I got it from. It's a little bit. It was about as cheap as the PDF. So what it is, as you can tell, it's a thick book. It's over 600 pages, I believe. And in terms of physicality, I'm only going to gloss over this because, as I said, it's available in several different versions. So if you don't like the hardcover, you can get the paperback. If you don't like actual hard copies, you can get the PDF, whatever. The physical creation, the physical structure is. The build quality's not perfect, but it's not terrible either. The way it's bound, it uses a lot of glue in place of what I would expect to normally have a cloth sewn backing. But it's adequate. It's not falling apart on me at all, and I've been actually using this one pretty heavily. Now, the overall review of this book is going to be more along the lines of my flip-throughs and my informal reviews. I don't have a lot of it scripted because, quite frankly, a lot of the book is very similar. You get a section up front, and I will go over it. You've got introductions and forewords. You've got humorous interviews with various people that were involved with the production of the series throughout the years. You got an interview with Rick Loomis, an interview with Paul Ryan O'Connor, who was the editor, an interview with Stephen S. Crompton, which was the primary illustrator, and in fact the illustrations are a huge part of this series. You've got an interview with Bear Peters, who from Flying Buffalo, and then you have a tongue-in-cheek interview with Grimtooth, who, although he looks like a orc or something on this, is actually a troll. Because, as I said, it is from the Tunnels and Trolls heyday, and their trolls look a little bit different than D&D trolls. The female one is Grimtina, his little, or I believe his sister. I don't know if it's his little sister. And she was introduced actually in later editions. This book includes Grimtooth's Traps, Grimtooth's Traps 2, Grimtooth's Traps 8, Grimtooth's Traps 4, and Grimtooth's Traps Light. And if you're wondering why the numbers jump around all there, they're not numbers. They're like homophones. They're words that sound like the numbers, but they're not actually the numbers. This does leave out a couple books, which were not... Grimtooth's Traps Bazaar is not in here, and the dungeon one is not in here either. Those are in the large foil versions, so they're not in your straight up hardcover thing. But that's okay, because I believe that this actually has more than enough content to handle, to make the money worth, if it's your thing. And we're going to go into that now. As you go through it, because it is a collection, you've got first a section, aside from the interviews up front, you've got a section on the history of Grimtooth traps, which is actually pretty interesting. And it actually covers a lot of the original different kinds of covers that were in the series throughout the years, because this series has been around since the 80s. And then you've got basically each of the books in turn. And each of the books is broken up into chapters. For instance, at least the first one is, you've got traps based on different concepts. So, for instance, Grimtooth's Traps 1, the first one, has things broken up into room traps, corridor traps, door traps, items and artifacts, then things. And basically each of those chapters has traps that would fall under that. I'm not going to go into each trap in general, because there are literally hundreds upon hundreds of traps here, and it would take forever. But at least in Grimtooth Traps 1, and I note this is actually throughout the book, you've got in pages that were originally part of a particular entry into this series. Each page is numbered in both the collection page and the actual page from that particular book. So if you're looking up a reference from the time period that tells you to look at a particular page in a particular book, you can find it in here aside from the usual collection page. And there's some additional things in here, for instance, and I should really get to them later, but there's additional things like comics and such that are not actually part of any one book, but instead are just part of the collection, and they're kind of mingled in here. In fact, the organization in this book is broken down a little bit like that. Now, as for the traps themselves are interesting, because even though they're system neutral, they're not designed to work, they're not designed to work with any particular RPG. Each one is actually ranked. And what you have, and I'm going to turn to a random page just to show, you've got text descriptions, you've got illustrations of most of the traps, not all of them, but illustrations of how the trap works. And if you see on this particular sample page, you've got a skull rating, and got these skull ratings from 1 to 4, I think. There may be a 5, I'm not sure, but I think most of them are 1 to 4. And that tells you in general how deadly the trap is. And that's actually incredibly useful for modern systems, because modern systems do tend to break down trap difficulty and tell you, well, okay, use this damage for this difficulty, this damage for this difficulty. It's going to make converting these particular traps into a modern system actually relatively straightforward, because you can go directly from the trap difficulty to the damage or whatever, or difficulty rating or whatever you want. Now, what I should note is that these traps, they are designed for your typical mythical dungeon, and they have a very old school style feel, both in terms of their deadliness and their organization, but also in their general lack of logic sometimes, because some of these things are mechanically infeasible, as well as their humor. The illustrations throughout this book really rely on you to take everything in there with kind of your tongue firmly in cheek. Grimtooth is the one that presents everything in character, and he is an evil troll, and as such, everything in here, in fact, pretty much accrues to the modern definition of the troll, and just trying to get a reaction out of people. I have to admit, I haven't looked through every single one of these traps, but I looked through quite a few of them, and they range from the pretty straightforward things that you'd expect, pretty much in any kind of dungeon design book, to the completely outlandish. And I've been designing dungeons and adventures since the 80s myself, and even I found stuff to inspire me in here. So even if you end up not using the traps directly, they do provide a serious source of inspiration. A lot of times I was looking at some of these traps and I was thinking, hey, that's deadly and all, that's cool and all, but hey, what if you did this as well, or this instead? And I have a feeling that some of my players are really, really going to hate me as I go through more and more of this book. It does have additional content, as I said. It's got comics in the middle, Grimtooth's Traps comics, which is a bonus. It's got some of the illustrations fixed, although I think that was from an earlier collection. So some of the early illustrations were then subsequently detailed out more thoroughly. Towards the end of the book, you have additional bonus traps in the new traps section, which is an entire chapter, but it's not really the same. It's not really this. It doesn't have the full layout of traps that are in the other chapters, but it's got a fairly decent amount of new traps. So even if you are a long-time collector of the Grimtooth trap series, there's a little bit extra in there. I don't know if it's enough to purchase the entire collection for it, but there's a little bit extra in there. So after that, you've basically just got some additional collection information. You've got humorous little examinations of things that happen throughout the history of the series. But aside from that, that pretty much covers the contents of the book. It does have this fold out in here, which I'm about to pop out actually for the first time. And this fold out, I believe, is simply, oh yeah, the board game. They at one time were going to do a whole board game, so they got that in there. If you want to take a look at it, here's a hint: it's not fair. It's not supposed to be fair. It's just amusing and actually kind of hilarious to look at. So in terms of whether it's worth it or not and whether you'll use it, I could go more in depth on these particular trap sections, but as I said, it's just a lot of... the entire book just follows that same format. Description of trap, rating, illustration. And some of them are really, really downright hilarious. If you are an old school dungeon designer, one that designs things, these wondrous, underground playground kind of things without really a sort of worry as to the exact, physical and realistic nature of some of the traps, although some of these traps do rely on real world physics. Don't get me wrong. Some of these, in fact, rely on modern understandings of chemistry, and some of them rely on layman's understandings of those modern understandings of chemistry, which may not always add up, may not actually always reflect the real world results of some of these chemical reactions that some of these traps rely on. But it should be enough for your average gaming group. And if you're somebody who designs these old school dungeons, you're looking for more ideas, you're running out of ideas for traps, yeah, I can recommend this. It was worth the price for me, even if I didn't want to do this review, even if I just wanted this thing to use as a reference, I would have bought it anyway. It is something that's going to be sitting on my shelf for a long time. Now, whether you buy the foil ones or not with the additional material, I can't really speak to that because the price really does go up. It is available on Amazon. It is available as a PDF on RPG Now, and it is available from Goodman Games Site itself. And I will put links to all of them in the description below, at least all the ones that I can find. So yeah, it is a pretty solid book. I'm going to be honest. I'm just hoping that this build quality still kind of bugs me. It does have the two ribbon bookmarks, at least in the hardcover. It's got the two ribbon bookmarks, but But these things, it looks like they could have done a lot better on that build quality. It looks like kind of like a, I'm not sure about the technical term for it. It looks almost like they just took the paperback stuff and then flushed it in here, which may or may not be great. But I do note that you can just open to a page and lay it flat, and it works just fine, which is good enough for me, good enough for the reference, and good enough for the work you're going to do with it. Because let's be frank, you're not going to pull this out of your bookshelf and refer to it constantly during a game like you might with the core rulebook, which incidentally, I still have issues with the original core rulebook for 5th edition. Anyway, before I get sidetracked, this is not 5th edition's. This is not a 5th edition discussion. This is a Grimtooth's Ultimate Traps collection discussion. For what it is, the physicality of the book works. The price is right. It was actually. I got to be honest. I didn't look at the page count initially when I ordered it. I was actually not expecting this book to have this much content in it. I honestly was not. So when I got it, I was actually very pleased to see it. But take it as you will. If you're looking for inspiration, I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it for the old school Dungeoneer. If you're into more realism and you don't care about traps that are designed to be both humorous and ironic at the same time, or traps that are just designed to be straight up deadly, then you can go ahead and skip it. Or if you're a player, you can go ahead and skip it. I found some amusement from it, though. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. Let me know if you like these kind of informal reviews. I was going to do a formal review, but it was just, as I said, it was just a lot of repetitive in terms of the actual layout. And I really couldn't do it without getting specifically into individual traps, which I didn't want to do. Because let's face it, that's the draw of this, is the specific individual traps. And you can actually probably get samples of some of them online to check out. I think, don't quote me on that. I'll take a look, though. Anyway, I'll leave it here. Let me know if you like these informal reviews. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content. If you want to help support the channel, go ahead and check out my Patreon at patreon.com/rpgcrawler. Until next time, take care and goodbye.